Welcome to The Lift. For the past several weeks we've been talking about the book of James and what it means to be rooted and what it means to find out what life is really all about, because life is about growing the way that God wants us to. Just like a tree grows based on its roots, we need to learn to grow based on the roots that God wants in our lives as well. Today we're going to continue our discussion on James chapter 4. And this is kind of a difficult lesson for us to learn. This is a lesson all in humility. And I like to think I'm pretty good at humility. As a matter of fact, I'm wanting to write a book called How to Be as Humble as I Am, because I am the most humble person that you could ever come in contact with. But as we know, that's not what being humble is. Being humble means even though you might know what gifts you have, or even though you might know what skills you may have, you never think of yourself as better than other people. Being humble means sometimes you just keep it to yourself. And that's what today's lesson is all about in James chapter 4. Here's what James tells us today. He says, "Humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." These are really important things, but at the end of this passage, James says again, he says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor." There's a story in the Bible about someone who humbled themselves and was lifted up in honor. And that's the story I'd like to talk to you about today. You see, Jesus, he was teaching and he was preaching with his disciples, and all of a sudden these religious leaders came to him, and they had a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. Now that means that she was having sex with someone who was not her husband, and they had caught her in the act and they had dragged her out in front of Jesus. And so you can imagine this woman is humiliated, not humbled at this point, but humiliated. And you can think that she was probably not fully clothed, maybe just a sheet wrapped around her, and she is down on the ground before Jesus. And all of these religious leaders look at Jesus and they say, "Jesus, the law says that we should stone this woman. The law says that she deserves to die. What do you say?" And Jesus gets down in the sand and he writes, and he stands up, and then he gets down in the sand and he writes again, and he says this: "It's okay if you want to stone her." And all the religious leaders, I'm sure at this time, were shocked that Jesus would tell them to stone this woman. But Jesus says, "But the person that gets to throw the first stone is the person who has never sinned before." And then Jesus just gets right back down in the sand and starts writing again. And can't you just picture Jesus like drawing cartoons or whatever? He's like, "Gotcha." But think about that. This woman is down on the ground in front of Jesus, naked, humiliated. And this is where being humble comes in. You see, the woman could have stood up and said, "Oh yeah, look at you now. Now I have won. But she understood that she didn't win because of herself. She won because of Jesus working in her life. So all the religious leaders walk away, and Jesus gets down next to this woman and lifts her up. And he says, "Go and don't sin anymore." And the woman leaves. Now let's think back through this. Again, the woman was humiliated, and then the woman was humbled. And there's a big difference, because humiliated means you got caught in the act, and humbled means that you understand what Jesus has done in your life, so that you don't have to keep doing those acts over and over and over again. So this woman was humiliated, but then Jesus stepped into her life, and because Jesus stepped in, she understood it was him, not her, and because of that, she was able to thank him. She was able to rely on him, and she was able to humble herself. And because she humbled herself, Jesus literally lifted her up in honor. He said, "Just go and don't do this anymore." That's exactly what James is talking about. He's saying, humble yourself before God. What he's saying is, you can't live without him. Don't pretend like you can. Don't pretend that you've earned this. It's all a gift, and every single day is a gift, and you have not earned a single one of them. So every single day, we need to remember that it's because of Jesus, it's because of God working in our lives that we are even able to stand. And once we can realize that, then we will be humbled. And once we are humbled, then we allow God to work more in our lives. And when He works more in our lives, that's how we receive His honor. So today the challenge is this: don't think of yourself as somebody who's awesome. Think of yourself as somebody who would be lost if they weren't rooted where they needed to be. And if you can do that, then you will be lifted up in honor, and you'll find out what life is really all about. This is The Lift.